Frederic Vaeremans is a director of digital solutions, and he's the global lead for the adoption of AI and generative AI at Tetra Tech. Although he is part of the central IT function in the organization, he considers himself as a non-techie, which is great, sitting between IT and the business units, ensuring technology is leveraged to its maximum potential to drive business growth, deliver efficiencies, quality improvements, and improve client service delivery. He is heavily involved in training on the subject and has provided plentiful advice across Tetra Tech on AI adoption strategies. In between delivering training and supporting end users, he spends a lot of time experimenting and identifying new use cases to leverage generative AI in the business. He is currently based in Norway, but is originally from Belgium. And we are very thankful to Frederic for giving us his time. Over to you, Frederic.
Thank you very much, Jim, for this beautiful introduction. Good evening, everyone. It's so good to be here with you and to be able to share some of my experiences about generative AI, and especially about the journey at Tetra Tech we've been on. And I've learned a lot by introducing generative AI across the business, working with a lot of users, including many engineers. So today, I really hope that I can share some of the lessons learned, and also, some advice, especially around prompt engineering, that may be helpful for you and encourage you to also have a go at using generative AI if you haven't already done so. And a bit of background. So I'm 51 years old, and I thought until recently that the introduction of the internet and online shopping, and then of course social media would kind of be the highlights from a technology innovation point of view in my lifetime. But I have to admit that I have to change my point of view on this, because the last couple of years, with the introduction of especially OpenAI's ChatGPT, it just continues to amaze me how this technology is impacting us all day to day in both private and work life, and the fantastic capabilities that these tools provide us. And you may probably know this, but it took only 5 days for ChatGPT to have 1 million users. In comparison, Netflix needed 3.5 years to hit 1 million users of its video streaming service. And currently, just for OpenAI, there's 700 million weekly users. If you add all the other AI solutions out there, you have well over 1 billion of users every week using this technology. And there's many surveys that people at McKinsey are doing to gauge how companies are using it. And 65% of one of the recent surveys stood out that they're regularly using generative AI now. And we at Tetra Tech, we do have a lot of engineers that are already using this in their daily work life for all sorts of things, whether it's design reviews, risk analysis, ideation, data crunching, etc. So the question isn't any longer if we use GenAI, but it's now all about how to use it. How should we use it effectively, responsibly, ethically? And knowing that you will have a couple of other AI sessions, so I decided to kind of focus on giving you a little bit of introduction of what actually generative AI is and how it works, what some of the popular tools out there, because obviously I don't know what the experience is of you, and I bet some of you will have significant experience already, but others, like I come across in Tetra Tech all the time, we have still a lot of staff, there's still a lot of people out there who are a bit hesitant, who haven't necessarily had the experience with generative AI, and hopefully this session will encourage you to do so. And I will especially spend a bit of time around prompt engineering, which is the new skill on the block that we all have to master to get on with this technology. And that's often where I see the adoption struggles. And that's why I've decided to dedicate quite a bit of my presentation tonight on sharing with you some frameworks, some techniques around how to get the best out of these tools. And I have tried to contextualize a little bit for engineering. I'm not an engineer personally, but a lot of what you will learn tonight and I will share is obviously widely applicable. I'll also touch about the key risks and challenges, because unfortunately there are some key challenges with this technology. I will share some lessons learned, especially for those of you that work in businesses which are currently struggling a little bit with where to start. Where do we start adopting this technology? And I will also show some engineering examples that, from colleagues I've seen in my company. So what's generative AI? It's important for you to just remember it is AI, right? It is artificial intelligence. But what it makes it different than the traditional AI is that it can create new stuff beyond what it has been exposed to as part of its training process. So it can create new content, text, images, videos. It can help with coding. It's very conversational. So you don't need to be a techie, you don't need to be a programmer and understand exact syntax to send instructions to the program. No, you can just use your natural language, no matter what language it is. I'm originally from Belgium, so I have conversed in Dutch. I can even upload a document in English and ask Dutch questions and answer in Dutch. So you can switch in these technologies very quickly from one language to another. And as I mentioned before, it's one of the fastest adopted new technology now because of how widely applicable it is, how easy it is to use, especially also in private life. And there are many, many different models with all their quirks and their advantages. And one thing I just want to make you aware of is that even though it's only really 3 years since this has become very popular, we're already in the second stage of this evolution to agentic AI. And agentic AI is basically combining GenAI agents which talk to each other and becomes almost semi or fully autonomous to take specific actions and to automate workflows, to do simulation, etc. So we're already seeing this technology rapidly evolving. Now, why is this important to you engineers? Why is this important to all of us, especially at work? Well, this technology can do things so much quicker than we humans can. It can read 10,000 words within a few seconds. It can for instance, write 3-4 pages easily within a minute. We cannot compete with this technology in that sense. So it allows us to do specific tasks that are low value or repetitive. It allows it to do much quicker. It's also leveling the playing field, especially now when you have a small team and you're missing some competencies. By complementing the team with AI, you can fill some of those gaps. For instance, we have now much more what we call citizen developers, because this technology like ChatGPT is being used in Tetra Tech to write Python code, for instance. So now suddenly everybody has the ability to write some basic Python code, but good enough for simple use cases. Previously, they would have to go to a developer to do that. It allows you to make decisions much smarter, faster. It's really good with data analysis and to understand, outliers, trends, etc. It's really an innovation accelerator. You can use it from brainstorming ideas, designs, to critique your work. And finally, I'm a great believer that this technology is really shifting the competitive landscape. Previously, technologies like this would only be accessible to very large companies with deep pockets, but now anyone can access this technology at a very, very low cost. Okay, so the entry point is very, very small. And that means like organization like us, so we are a 30,000 strong multi-billion dollar business, but we have marketplaces where we are now competing with very nimble small operators who have found clever ways of using generative AI and making our life quite difficult and competing really hard. So we have to follow suit. Now, what is really important for you to understand is that there is a balance to strike. It's not all opportunities. There are some key challenges as well. So on the opportunities, I mentioned speed, the fact you can scale up easily, it's creative, you can do all endless personalization, etc. But there are some significant challenges. First and foremost, the lack of accuracy. These tools are not as accurate as people think they are, which means you have to be really careful and know and still be in control. Compliance and ethics is a big issue, and I will talk a little bit more about that. The same with bias. These models have been trained on a significant amount of data, public data, which of course intrinsically includes some bias. And depending on how you use it, you might inadvertently just make things worse. And of course, data security. These systems are very well connected, and there's always risks involved. And I know there's a later session in the next couple of weeks around data security. So what this means is at Tetra Tech, Our goal is not to replace our expertise, but it's there to amplify it. So we are trying to encourage as much as possible staff to get started with generative AI, to amplify their expertise, to make them much more productive, so that can focus on high value activities rather than some of the lower value activities that, are not necessarily always appreciated by clients either. And it is really important because of the challenges to keep the human in the loop, so to speak. Human oversight is really critical. It can create otherwise more risk than value. So here you can see, some ideas of what it can do. It's extremely good with reasoning over text-based files, for instance. You can upload different contracts, ask it to do a comparison. You can, potentially upload RPFs and ask it to do, or, a proposal you're about to send to a client. You can ask it to critique it from the point of view of a client, or to do a gap analysis between your proposal and the original requirement. You can use it for translation, data analysis. I mentioned before, it's really, really good in statistical analysis, in complex calculations, depending on what model you use. GIS geoprocessing, that might be relevant to some of you on this call. Sensor, QC, QA, those are all examples of things you can do. The same in management, creative task. You can also use it to help you learn a new skill. I'm actually using it to learn some more Python and also to learn the Norwegian language, because I've just moved to Norway. So again, it can be a very handy coach as well. So there's endless opportunities to use this, both at work and in your personal lives. Now, I'm sure some of you will wonder, what are typical the popular GenAI models out there and solutions. So the models which basically runs a lot of the tools that you may be familiar with. The main one, of course, is OpenAI's ChatGPT. We have now ChatGPT 5.0. We still have some legacy models, 4.1, 4.0, etc. So it's very conversational, very versatile, good for coding, for reasoning with text. So it's an all-purpose, and they are pushing more and more towards what we call general knowledge bots. But you also have Claude from Anthropic. We have obviously Google, which is Gemini. Gemini 2.5 is really powerful, especially in the science area. The same with Grok. You have Llama, Cohere. There are smaller models that potentially you could run independently in your own cloud environment if you wish to do so, while ChatGPT is just too big and too expensive to run yourself. And then, of course, you have specialized models. For instance, GitHub Copilot for coders, but you have DALL-E, Midjourney, Stable Diffusion, which are models specifically designed to create images, 2D, 3D, from text prompts. And the same with Sora, 11 Labs, Synthesia. There are solutions that can actually turn your instruction into very realistic voice and videos. And you probably already heard of some of the deep fake videos that, unfortunately, there's always the flip side, this technology. Bad actors can obviously use it as well to create deep fakes, because they become so realistic that you can hardly see the difference between the real person and the fake one. There's also enterprise and productivity tools. Microsoft Copilot is what we also use in, and some of you may use it in your company. So I'm sure most of you will use either Google Workspace or Microsoft Office for your day-to-day, for your words, for spreadsheets, Word, email, etc. And of course, these vendors are not standing still. They have introduced their own AI capability and GenAI capability. So for instance, when you have Copilot for Office 365, you can activate a AI agent that, while you have a meeting with clients or with your colleagues, it will take notes, it will take actions, and it will give you a nice summary at the end. So you can focus on the conversation rather than having also to take notes. You can have suggested content in Word. You can do advanced formulas in Excel, etc. The same in Google. And then you have also the enterprise version of those. So ChatGPT has an enterprise version, which is much more secure, faster. If your company is considering going for ChatGPT, please use the enterprise version. It is more expensive, but it gives some significant benefits in terms of capacity, security especially. They do not train on your data, for instance. It's very well encrypted. So for a larger organization, it's a no-brainer. If you want to go ChatGPT, you need to really consider enterprise rather than the premium or the Teams offering. You also have Microsoft AI Foundry, which is a whole platform with services to develop AI solutions. And then I kind of, because I know I'm talking to engineers, here are a couple of solutions that I'm aware of from colleagues in our business. Of course, Autodesk, I'm sure you all know Autodesk. Autodesk has AI capability now, and AutoCAD has specific AI add-ons to help you with some of your workflows for design optimization, especially for simulation. You have Bentley Systems. We are in partnership with Bentley on a few client projects where we create digital twins. And again, there's AI involved to help with identifying, classifying, and tagging objects, as well as helping again with simulation, what if scenarios, etc. I'm sure you have heard of Siemens and NVIDIA. They have a partnership for industrial AI. So Omniverse and MindSphere are their respective products, but they are combining efforts to create a really very powerful AI suite of services for manufacturing and electromechanical engineering. You have GitHub for engineers as well, not just for coders. And then there are some construction-specific tools. You may have heard of Procore AI and BuildDots, which are AI assistants for project construction, project management, site monitoring, etc. So I now want to spend 10 minutes or so talking about prompt engineering. You probably wonder, what is prompt engineering? Well, a prompt is the instruction that you send to a generative AI agent. So it's a text that you type in and submit to the model. So prompt engineering is just a term that refers to the art of designing, writing, refining prompts. It's all about how can you get to desired output, good quality output, as quickly as possible without ending up in a 20 long chit chat with the bot. Okay, so it's all about making it a reliable assistant. And one thing I really want to make you aware of is that GenAI is not a search engine. And unfortunately, I still see in a lot of staff at Tetra Tech where when they come to me with problems and, sometimes they can't get what they want to. And I see often that they are still treating it as a search engine and enter too short prompts. As you can see on the left-hand side, if I want to know the speed of the jaguar, the animal, I can just type in speed jaguar, just two keywords in Google or in Bing, and I most likely will get immediately what I'm looking for, as the example shows. However, when you type in speed jaguar in a solution like ChatGPT, you'll immediately see what happens there. Could you clarify what you mean? Why? Because jaguar, the term jaguar, can mean different things, of course. Are you talking about the car brand, the animal, or something else? So just a simple example to show that you have to behave differently when you use generative AI solutions. You have to be much more explicit and much more longer in your prompts. Every word matters, believe me. These systems are so sensitive to your work choice and to the prompt that you have to be willing to experiment. When you send a prompt and you don't get necessarily the best results straight away, just go back, change a few words, add a little bit more context. So iteration is really the name of the game. And you also have to treat it as like a junior colleague who has never got any experience in your subject matter. So you have to set a context. You have to be very explicit in your instructions. And also like synonyms, when you use the word risk and you reformulate your prompt, but this time instead of risk, you use challenge or issue, you will see different reactions. So sometimes you have to be careful with synonyms because you think that they all means the same thing, more or less, but actually the bot will react differently. So think of prompt writing as programming with words. Precision in language is your code, so be mindful of that. Now, for some of you that are interested to how these technologies work, I have now put this slide together, which shows in a significantly simplified manner. If anybody's on the call who's a data scientist or data engineer or AI engineer, this is really created to make non-technical people aware of how these things work, because it's important that you understand why they behave the way they do. So what happens when you send a prompt? So when you, for instance, ask it, what's the capital of France? The first step it will do is what we call tokenization. The prompt is being broken down into smaller parts. They might be words or often parts of a word. And it's then it assigns a numerical value, a representation value, which is a representation of that element against a massive dictionary. The next step then, it is trying to, of course, establish meaning. It's trying to understand the context of your prompt. And it does that by mapping those token IDs against a significant large vector. You hear sometimes 1 billion parameters. So that's 1 billion levels of granularity it can deal with. So in this example, for instance, it will start looking at the words and the relationship of the words and where they are. And it will very quickly pick up that the word capital is in close proximity to the word France. So it will start thinking, aha, it's probably after the capital of France rather than the capital letter. And then it will start tapping into advanced brain and capability, and it will start putting a probability distribution together. And this is important for you to understand. A lot of people don't know this. It's actually a predictive model. It actually predicts the best word to return back to you. So here in this example, you would hope that Paris has the highest probability, and as such, it will give you Paris. But the probabilities could sometimes be a bit closer, and sometimes it may not pick the top highest probability and feed another one. So it's really important for you to understand that if you change a word, so if you change a word in your token, in your prompt, the tokenization numerical representation will be different. So it will map differently against the vector. It will have a different probability distribution, and as such, you get a different return. And this sits is underpinned by neural networks, which I truly call the black box. Even today, there's still one of the biggest brains in the world that still cannot explain fully how these systems are actually learning and evolving. It's a bit like our brain. We still discover new things about our brain. And it's obviously trained on a vast amount of data. So hopefully this makes you understand how these things work. So the most important thing is that when it returns a response to you, when it starts typing back to you, it's actually the output of a predictive, like a predictive model. So it really predicts the best fit. Okay, so it doesn't know facts. That's important. So what's the foundation of a great prompt then? Of course, a clear task or instruction. And here I would recommend you not to treat it as a search engine in the sense of don't ask all the time, but task. We'll come back later. It's really important to use action verbs to be very explicit. The second element that some of you might be surprised about is role-playing. Believe it or not, but role-playing and perspective setting is a significant, powerful mechanism to get much better outputs much quicker. So you can actually, in your prompt, you can start your prompt saying, you are a hydrologist, or act as a hydrologist, or a legal expert specialized in X, Y, Z. And what actually happens is by doing so, you're actually indicating to the model that you're interested in the body of knowledge related to hydrology and the capabilities and skills that comes with that. So it's a shortcut in essence, and it gives a bit more certain where it has to go and find its knowledge and in its brain. Goal and context, very important. And this is where the main issue is often with bad prompting, where people do not spend the time to explain what's the objective, what's the problem, the context. These systems are not plugged into your own internal systems. It doesn't know you. So you have to make things really explicit in your prompt. And then you have the return format. Believe it or not, but you can be extremely specific in how you want the output to be returned. Do you want a table? If so, which columns? You can say, give a table, the result in the table with 3 columns, with column A, this, B, C, etc. You can ask it to be a numbered list, a bullet point list. You can also specify the tone. Do you want it to write formal, informal, energetic, enthusiastic, humorous, like Trump, for instance? Try that, actually. It's a funny thing. You will be amazed. It understands even how Trump speaks and projects himself when you feed something dull text and ask it to write it as it was Trump. So you can do all sorts of things to make sure the format, the return, the output is to your liking. And then finally, you can also provide examples. When you struggle to articulate exactly how you want the output to be, you can also provide a couple of examples, and it will just very quickly mimic this. And you can also request for more examples, and that's a very good practice to always ask a couple of examples, not just taking one answer as the gospel. To remember all this in Tetra Tech, we use the CRISPy framework. The CRISPy framework is a very handy framework to help you remember what the key ingredients are for a good prompt. It's not a framework we have developed. It's developed by Matt Nye of GitHub, so credit to him. But it's very useful, and we evangelize this framework in Tetra Tech because it's so easy to understand. So the C and the R stand for capacity and role, is to help remember that you can start, and it's good practice to start with the role you want your bot to play in that specific scenario. The I stands for insight, all the background information, the context, why you're having the conversation in the first place, what are you trying to achieve. The S stands for statement, which is the task, what you wanted to do. The P stands for personality, which of course is the format as I explained before, and the tone. The E stands for examples or experimentation. So either you give examples, it's really good practice in some scenarios, or you ask for experimentation. Ask it to give you a couple of options. So normally in the sessions I run at Tetra Tech, I would ask you now to open up ChatGPT and have a go at writing your first CRISPy prompt. But of course, we don't have time for this. So I have developed a quick brief here, and just to show you how I would build a CRISPy prompt in practice. For instance, imagine I'm preparing a short presentation for my senior management team, and the topic is all about large water infrastructure projects. The manager wants to understand what the biggest risks are and how they might impact costs and delivery, and what mitigation steps I can think of. So starting with the role, in this scenario, for instance, you could start with, you are an experienced project manager of large water infrastructure projects. So that's kind of the capacity, the context, because we are looking at a project to do with large water infrastructure. Then I can set a context. So now I'm explaining why I'm having the conversation. I need help. I need help to create a short briefing and presentation. I don't want zillions of risks. I'm going to focus on the top 5. I'm also specifying here that these projects typically are complex. I'm also specifying some context that the fact that my audience here are actually non-technical. The executives here in this scenario are not infrastructure specialists. And then I'm setting the task. So your task is to identify the 5 most critical risks, explain their likely financial impact, outline, etc. Then I'm specifying the format. So in this example, I want a table with risk, financial impact, and mitigation. And I want a professional, persuasive tone, suitable for senior executives who are not technical experts. I'm not going to show examples here, it's not needed, but I'm going to experiment with 2 versions. I want a written version of up to 500 words, so notice how specific I am in my instructions. And then a second version as 3 slides, including heading, no more than 5 bullet points, because typically in my company, you have to provide the report as well as a short presentation to the management team. So if I now show you, so I'm now running this in our ChatGPT environment. And as you can see, I very quickly get some really decent output. So it's now showing in a table format 5 risks with an executive summary, and then it creates a slide deck. I asked for no more than 3 slides with speaker notes, and one of the slides had to include a table. And again, it's doing what I've asked to do. Of course, important to check content, but I'm just showing the benefits. If you had started with, hey, tell me about project risk in water infrastructure, you probably would have to go back and forward quite a few times. This content is almost perfect. Here, I would probably go back only once or twice to fine-tune it before copying it into PowerPoint or in a Word template. Of course, some of you will probably wonder, hey, Frederic, do I really have to write such long prompts all the time? It depends on the context. So for moderate, complex, or in-depth tasks, something like CRISPy is really, really handy, okay? It stops you rushing too much, think through how to formulate it. But of course, if I have to translate something from English to Norwegian, or I have to convert something from Fahrenheit to Celsius, I'm not going to say, hey, act as an expert in Norwegian language, blah, blah, blah. No, you're just going to say, translate this text to whatever. So for straightforward one-off queries, but I just wanted to share this framework because it has made a massive difference in our organization in terms of the skills, and I clearly see that people are getting much, much better when they apply those principles. And of course, there are many other frameworks. You might have come across Apex, CARS, Task, and you will get a copy of my slides, and there's a link to Kana Lucassen has a LinkedIn article about these frameworks, which is really handy. So I've picked the three most relevant ones. And then the last one is one that I have developed for Tetra Tech, which we call Crikey, which is more in the context of creating standalone agents. When you create an agent, we have our own solution called Tetra Agent, but we also have, obviously, you have GPTs that you can create. Some of you have been using ChatGPT, know you can create your own bespoke little agents called GPTs. Crikey is very handy there because you need to treat it slightly different because it's a reoccurring activity you're going to do with it. So Crikey stands for Context, Rules, Instructions, Knowledge, which is the knowledge files that you upload, and then Evaluation, which is you built in a self-check step because for accuracy, compliance, etc. So some extra tips for you when you use these tools. Think before you start, okay? Don't treat them as search engine, just randomly start putting keywords in. Experiment. Change word choice, add more information, so iterate. Get used to how it's behaving to your word choices. The more you use it, the better you get to know each other, the better you will, and the faster it will go. Ask for step-by-step reasoning if you're not sure why it's giving you a specific output, and use your words to control the depth and breadth. Sometimes you want something shallow, sometimes you want to go deep. Use your word choices to do that. Now, unfortunately, I also see what I call many sins, typical things, and I've already touched on them. And I've come across this article, The 7 Deadly Sins of Prompting by Ruben Hassid. Again, the link is there. But I would say, based on a year of rolling this out in Tetra Tech, I have adapted a little bit based on my observations. The first is no context, where, for instance, people upload a document, summarize this without any further context. What's the context? Why are you uploading a document and asking to summarize it? What are you trying to do? Okay. Vague instructions, where talk about marketing trends as an example. What marketing trends and what context again? It's vague, and the context is very much related to the first point. Treating like Google, where they're just asking all the time instead of tasking. You get far better results by actually tasking it rather than ask open-ended questions. Another thing I can see is where people obviously are very impatient and then just ask everything at once. Like this example, develop the entire marketing strategy, including social media, email campaigns, and content calendar. It has no direction with a prompt like this. You need to start breaking it down in several steps. Not iterating, where people are just, again, lack of patience. They just expect the best results straight away. Take whatever it gives as the gospel. No, ask it. It's super creative. So you use its creative power to give you more options, to give you different angles on something. Okay, so as this example here. Not validating outputs is extremely dangerous because I will show you in a minute that it does hallucinate often. So what looks right doesn't mean it is right. So you always have to make sure that you check the outputs before you use it, and use any local experts or your own expertise to sense check. And information overload, especially, again, I see a lot of people uploading a lot of documents in one go with a crispy style prompt, and then they're surprised that the output is not great. Why? Because you're basically loading the agent too much. We call it cognitive load. There is a cognitive load limit. Unfortunately, it doesn't tell you. Okay? It will never say no. We humans, if we are under a lot of pressure, if we have too much work, we will at some stage complain to our manager that you will look stressed. You will be stressed out. These bots, they don't work like this. They will continue to please you and to do whatever, no matter what you throw at it. But the quality will start deteriorating. Let's talk about some key issues then and challenges. So I mentioned already hallucinations. These tools, unfortunately, can produce a lot of inaccurate information if you try to, for instance, especially with factual information. It doesn't really know factual information. If it hasn't learned the facts as part of its training process, it might give you an inaccurate example. And the reason why is because obviously it has knowledge gaps, outdated knowledge. Most of the models now available it takes months and months to train a model. So, for instance, the latest model of ChatGPT, I believe, is current up to beginning of this year, which means if you would ask something with web search disabled about something that happened a month ago, you might not get the answer or not the correct answer. It also does pattern guessing a lot as part of its training process. Sometimes it will guess patterns wrong. And sometimes it's us as a user, misleading prompts. So there are several ways to help you detect and avoid hallucinations. So you can't completely take them out, but at least you can minimize by checking and validating your sources. So always ask for its source, check recency, validate against trusted docs and sites. If you upload a document, ask for citation and page number if it's meant to be responding to your question using the content of the document you've uploaded. You can also apply chain of verification. It's a simple technique where you basically start a new chat and you ask questions about the previous chat to validate the output. So if you're saying, hey, who are the last 10 Nobel Prize winners, and you get a list of 10, and you're saying 8 doesn't look that correct, you can have a new chat and saying, hey, was so-and-so, has so-and-so won the Nobel Prize, for instance, as a simple example. So you get a gist of it. Asking for reasoning steps and its sources is really important. And one powerful prompt that you should often add is let's think step by step. Even though the current reasoning models by default will start giving you more explanation, not just the answer, but by adding let's think step by step, you indicate that you really want a granular step-by-step overview of how it comes to conclusion. And you will see it's amazing how you can see how it's reasoning. And by checking its reasoning, you can also then identify any gaps or things that it has missed out. Another technique is self-reflecting prompts. Believe it or not, but it does help to ask it to critique its own output. As an example, you can say, hey, review your own work. Where is it unclear, incomplete, or biased? Provide both the draft and improved version. So you can use techniques like this. So please have a go at using these. Again, when you upload documents, sequence your prompts. I always upload my document first and ask for a summary, a short summary. Not because I'm interested in the summary, but because by asking, I know it has memorized the content. It has tokenized, vectorized, associate meaning to the document. And then I'm giving the crispy prompt. So I'm not combining the uploading and the fact it has to ingest all the information as well as understand my prompt. So by separating that into 3 different chats, it's much, much better. And obviously read the output thoroughly. I know it's a no-brainer, but believe me, I can sometimes see people just blindly copy and pasting and not paying attention. The other challenge is data privacy and security. And this is really important that there's a lot of free stuff out there, right? You have a free ChatGPT version if you want, the same with Gemini. But be mindful that these free tools often will use your inputs and anything you upload to further improve the model. That also means that that information that you've entered and uploaded can end up being accidentally shared downstream because a model will be using it and you never know. It might pop up somewhere down the line. So it's extremely important to check the tools you're using, that they keep your data private. So we in Tetra Tech only allow our staff to use approved tools, and we would never tolerate a tool that would use our inputs and our documents to train its own model and to have access to that. So that also means be very sensible when it comes to sensitive, personal, and classified data. Okay, so you need to be really, really careful. We have also a growing pool of clients that are now telling us that they don't want us to use AI with their data. So obviously we need to respect that. So you may be in the same boat. So just be mindful of that. And the other challenge is ethical use, because I mentioned before, it has been trained through scraping, incredible amount of data from the public web and other sources, which, intrinsically will have bias. So you can actually reinforce stereotyping and bias if you're not careful. And especially this is important in the context of, when you use it for like people-related processes, etc., and selection of candidates for interviews and all that stuff. You have to be really, really careful. And another challenge is lack of explainability. If you run a prompt today and you use the outputs in a client output, and let's say in 3 weeks' time, your manager asked to go back and see how it was created. If you haven't stored it, you cannot replicate it. You can send the same prompt 3 weeks down the line, but you'll get a completely different answer. So you cannot, and you can often not explain why it gives you a different answer. So you have to be mindful of that. So transparency is very important, protecting privacy and ensuring compliance, of course, with the EU AI Act. You should all be aware of it. You're part of EU. So please be mindful. There is a significant change that has occurred last year with the EU AI Act, with some stipulation, especially if you have developed your own, commercialized your own AI solutions, which are perceived as high risk, which are related to infrastructure, critical infrastructure, etc. So again, happy to talk after the call about that if you need any information. And then some lessons learned from what we've been doing at Tetra Tech. I would say our key challenges that we were facing, and that I think you will face in your organization as well, is obviously data security and privacy. I already touched on that, but also workforce concerns. I'm sure that some of you on this call will be very uncomfortable, and I sometimes have felt uncomfortable with the pace of this technology. And, of course, we're all fearing a little bit, is this going to replace us, etc. So you need to recognize this and you need to factor that in when you try to introduce this technology to your staff and with your colleagues. Skills gap. Although it's easy to use, there is an art. It is, the reason why I spent quite a bit of time today on prompt engineering is, trust me, I see day in, day out the difference it makes between effective prompting and not effective prompting. Okay, so please, if you're planning to use this, spend enough time upskilling yourself. There's loads of resources available. Another challenge for companies is prioritization, because it can do so many things. Where do you focus? And of course, it's important to focus on areas where there's a clear return on investment, that you're not wasting your time on either low-value experiments, but also the opposite. I sometimes have to temper some of my colleagues down who are trying to run too fast before they learn to walk. So they're trying to do things which the technologies that can definitely not do. So it's a time wasting trying to crack it. And of course, choosing the right tools. There's so many tools and models out there. Again, you need to make sure that you choose a good tool. So our approach is that we have a GenAI policy, and we have updated our IT policies to at least make sure that all staff are clear how to use and how not to use this fantastic, powerful technology. We limit access to all staff to AI solutions. So they cannot experiment with the latest new tools because the firewall blocks it. There is a process to request to evaluate any newly available tools, and we will evaluate from a business need point of view, from security compliance point of view, cost of ownership, etc. And we have a request process for licenses. So we offer licenses to staff for Copilot, for ChatGPT, and other tools. We have also developed our in-house GenAI solution, and that's my day job these days, is to roll this out. And we have already over 5,000 staff that have been using it in the last month, 20% of those that can access it, and it's growing every month. And we have done this because it's too expensive in a large organization to give everybody a license. And we are so passionate that our staff needs to learn to get on. It's like a new key skill, an essential skill. So that's why we have introduced it. It's not as good as ChatGPT or Copilot, but it serves well for basic tasks, and it's a very good introduction. We also use enterprise-grade solutions, so we always make sure we work with trusted vendors and the popular with global support. We offer a lot of training. So I run regularly virtual prompt engineering courses, which is 2 hours, and the last hour is a group exercise. I'm also giving a lot of inductions to ChatGPT, to our own Tetra agent, and bespoke sessions for leadership teams where they want me to help them identify in their own operating unit how to leverage this technology effectively. And I'm also managing a lot of communities of practice. And I'm sure you have Microsoft Teams as well, and you use it. It's a very effective way of combining users. We organize a show and tell, to encourage, because we are a global organization, sometimes, people not necessarily naturally meet each other. So my role is also to bridge that and to make sure that we don't reinvent the wheel and to share good practice, and we have tip of the week, etc. And some tips for you, for your organization. I mentioned already making sure you choose the right tools. Go for safe enterprise-grade tools. Take a pilot mindset, start small, experiment. Make sure you have training from day one. We learned the hard way. We didn't focus on training. We were getting too excited and carried away by making this technology available. People do need support. Not everybody is tech savvy. Some people, this is really a big step for them. And we use now our AI champions, local AI champions, to support the local users. Communicate openly about why you're introducing it, and that is not about replacing people, but it's about amplifying the expertise. Make sure you have policies in place that are up to date and relevant, and don't default to AI for everything. Okay, so make sure you articulate where the value is and where there isn't value. Reinforce human oversight and make collaboration the standard. And then finally, in a few minutes, some examples of things I have seen in the engineering world. We have in Canada a unit that is using generative AI as an intelligent assistant for specification. So when they get specifications from client, technical specification, they have contractual requirements, they have standards they have to meet. So they use an agent very effectively to search, to extract, to cross-reference, cutting a lot of manual effort and obviously faster turnaround, fewer errors. Another unit is using it for design reviews. They use a vision capability where they upload drawings and check, because sometimes it's hard in complex drawing to see where the changes are. And we have a very high degree of success with some of the agents we've created for that. Safety and compliance check is an obvious one, because all of you, if you have ChatGPT, you can upload a couple of Irish standards, upload a specification saying, hey, does this meet the standard? And it will do a very, very good job. We also use it for project management, so project communication. We have projects where there's a lot of people involved, a lot of complex engineering. Not all the people in the project are technical. So again, it's about turning a lot of notes and things into client-friendly reports, updates, visual slides, etc. And then finally, one of my favorite ones that I've seen is where they use the vision capability to good order, where they upload images and video footage of sites, building sites, and they use it to help inspections, to detect issues, to track progress over time, and to document findings, etc. So really, really good use case of how you can use these things. So, and that's it. I think that was about 42 minutes, a couple of minutes longer than I wish, but hopefully this was interesting to you. And hopefully you have a few things you can take away and try yourself, and hopefully it will help you improve how you use those tools.
Thanks, Frederic. That was fantastic. It was really, really good. And I've heard you talk before, and it's great to hear you again. It's really, really good. So there are a few questions in there, so I think we'll take first. I think, Mark, do you want to handle them? Mark Cotter is in there.
Yeah, I can take a few questions there if you have.
They're in the Q&A
So
there.
our simplest question is, did you use AI to create this presentation?
I always use AI with any presentation, often as a starting point. When I'm staring at a blank piece of paper, it's sometimes good to use AI, but again, by explaining the objectives, etc., or examples, I use a lot of the same content for a while, and then I'm using AI to try to say, hey, can you find similar things? And for us, we are very transparent in our organization. And in fact, we encourage people to use it. So for us, it's not a big deal. But yeah, it can be very useful when you have to present stuff.
Can you give an idea of the energy consumption for using any of these AI models?
Yeah, so that is the biggest challenge. And I get that question often in Tetra Tech as well. And that's why we are so passionate about making sure that people use it effectively for the right reason. Because unfortunately, each time you press enter, the same with Google, by the way, when you do searches, consumes water. I can't remember. There was a piece of research showed it's 200 milliliters of water, because obviously the amount of energy the data centers consume for cooling, for power. Fully aware of that, and we're trying to make people aware of this by effective prompting, so that you can get to your results by fewer prompts, because the more prompts, the more you consume, of course, and for the right use cases. We're also trying to people not to use it for silly things, and there's a big, probably some of you will know, in the public space and social media, there's a big hee-haw about should you say thank you. A lot of people being very polite, but each time you say thank you, it will return with you're welcome. So that's another two times you potentially consume energy for no benefit, really. So we are discouraging that.
What is the most impressive example you've seen of an application for civil engineering from AI?
Oh gosh, that's a good question. A civil engineering application. I mean, I would. Well,
Oh,
I have to say, I have a soft spot for digital twins, and one of the projects we're doing in Texas, which involves creating a digital twins for a big engineering, is actually quite phenomenal. The speed at which they can simulate. Another example is where we used AI to simulate specific and to create kind of a course with using virtual reality for training in a context where breaking something would be so expensive. So, like on an oil rig, breaking something just for the matter of learning how to fix it is pretty expensive and not feasible. So, we have delivered a project that uses AI and virtual reality to create an experience where people can in a kind of see with their special VR glasses on. So those are all examples that really wowed me, where you bring this technology together, not just a standalone, but with digital twins and AI, and the same AI and virtual and artificial reality, you can do significant many things.
There's a question about versions of GPT. The latest is GPT-5. Do you see any differences between GPT-5 and GPT-4 or other alternatives?
Yes, definitely. So GPT-5, what the novelty is. So OpenAI had often the criticism that they have too many models to choose from. So if you turn the clock 2 months, you had so many different, some say 7 or 8 different models. And it confused the hell out of people what to use, when to use deep reasoning models like the one starting with O. And GPT-5, actually, there's only 3 versions of 5. And the standard one will decide itself based on your prompting whether it should go into thinking mode and deep thinking. Or you can also immediately go for the thinking mode by selecting it or go to pro, but you have limitations there. So from enterprise, we only have, I think, 15 pro sessions per month. So because it takes so much energy and effort. So that also means that we have to change the way we prompt. So now I have to be mindful in GPT-5 that in the way I formulate my prompt, I need to, if I really wanted to think thoroughly, I have to explicitly say so now, okay? Because otherwise it may stay superficial. It may not use its full. No, it's quite good in automatically deciding what it has to do, but now you can also make it more explicit. And part of my internal training that I deliver now starts including some of these lines that you can add to regulate in your prompting how deep you want GPT-5 to go to make it quicker. But in terms of the output, I haven't noticed much quality or depth. It all depends on the prompts. But I would say, yeah, I still like 4.1. We're running 4.1 at Tetra Agent as our default agent. That's what most staff use day in, day out, and it's perfectly fine.
Can you explain more about tokenism and what's the logic behind it?
Gosh, don't make my life easy at this time of the day. What's the logic behind tokenism? It's a way of, it needs to associate meaning in some form. So it's a way of understanding the positions of words in a sentence. And it cuts it up because there are endings, word endings that like the beginning of uninterested, and indicate something that it's not, or etc. So it needs to understand, and that's the best way I can explain that. Tokenizing is just a way of it's preparing before it has to associate meaning. It needs to have a vehicle to apply meaning, and it does that by having a way of it needs numerical. It needs something numerical to reason over. So that's the best way I can explain it.
One last question. So, how accurate is the AI translation?
Sorry.
How accurate is the AI translation of documents?
The AI translation is really good for everyday translation. However, you may want to look up DeepL, which is a specialist language translation service where you can build your own dictionary. So when you have to translate really technical language, So, for instance, we have a project that involves people in Brazil as well in the States, and they have to translate sometimes really technical language. It doesn't necessarily deal very well with that. So we then use DeepL as a substitute because it's really powerful for technical, and you can train it as well. But for day to day, I mean, we use it all the time for social media. I know our marketing corporate comms teams use it. I've used it all the time because I live in Norway and I need to speak Norwegian with my Norwegian colleagues or write in Norwegian, and I do a lot of translation. And when I translate it to Norwegian and then I ask it to translate it back to English, I sometimes do that to see whether it has not changed my context. Because, it's not necessarily always literally translating it, okay? You have to be a bit careful. But in general, it's pretty good. I would say for day to day, it's really good.
It's coming up to 8 o'clock, so we will be closing out. Just look, we thank you for your time. The examples of the types of AI out there and your knowledge of them is fantastic. The examples of use of engineering, and I know there in the last couple of weeks that water infrastructure question I asked myself something very similar, but I didn't think even of using the AI model, and I'd like to see now how I'll get on, but I still have learning to do with the questions. I've noted that. That's fantastic. As I said, we're very thankful for your time. So next week's event is a hybrid event. So Padraig Riley of Boxcore is going to talk about AI in construction. And after that, we have another hybrid event, and that is Ken Egan of PM. He's going to talk about everyday use of AI. And then Dun McGrath at the end of the month, on the 28th, I think, is going to talk about security issues, and that'll be online only. And all these just can be found in the events page, or will be found in the events page on the Engineers Ireland website. So again, Frederic, thanks very much for your time, and we might hear from you again sometime. You never know. You
Thank
never
you
know.
very much. Thank you for having
Thanks.
me.
Cheers.
Have a
Bye bye.
nice evening, everybody.
Bye bye.